Hi, and welcome to the International Reading Association's first Google Hangout. I'm Jamie Gravel, social media strategist for IRA. Tonight we're hanging out with Ruth Culham, author of The Writing Thief, using mentor text to teach the craft of writing. Ruth, did you want to?
Sure. I was just taken up by how pretty that cover is, I have to say. Every time I look at it, I really like it more and more. Hi, everybody. I'm Ruth Culham, and I'm so happy to be here tonight talking about the use of mentor text in the classroom to help students become better writers. And who better to do that with than many of these esteemed authors who are with us tonight on this Google Hangout. So I know some of you through my work across the country, working with you directly in schools and in districts, talking about the traits of writing, talking about the different qualities it takes to really help students move forward in their writing and deepen their thinking. So we're really excited to have this focus on using mentor text tonight, and I just hope that everybody has a good time. So I'm going to hand it back to you, Jamie.
Thank you. Tonight we're going to talk about strategies to make the most of mentor text in your classroom. And here to help us do that are three incredible scholastic authors. Hopefully at some point we'll have a fourth. David Harrison is lost in cyberspace right now, but hopefully he'll make it and find us. Tonight we have Lisa Yee, Kate Messner, and Varian Johnson. Why don't we take a minute and we'll get to know our panelists. Varian, why don't you start?
Okay, hi, my name is Varian Johnson. Hold on, here is my Twitter handle. Hopefully you guys can see it. I'm the author of books for children and young adults. My latest novel is called The Great Green Heist, which was published by Scholastic about 4 months ago. And just excited to be here and to talk about mentor text. I certainly used a lot of text when writing this book, and happy to talk about it.
Hey, so I'm Kate Messner, and
oh, sorry. Who's next?
It's me. All right. So I'm Kate Messner, and that's at Kate Messner on Twitter. I'm really happy to be joining everybody. I will hang out with these people any day of the week. You probably know me as the author, well, depending on what grade level you teach. If you work with younger grades, you might know me as the author of Over and Under the Snow. Or if you work with older kids, I write kind of a wide variety of books for those kids. I do the Marty McGuire chapter book series and some science thrillers like Wake Up Missing and Eye of the Storm, and also the Scholastic mystery series that starts with Capture the Flag. So I'm really excited to be here tonight too, talking mentor texts and not only how we use mentor texts in our work, but I'm also a former teacher, so I'll talk a little bit about how I have used a lot of mentor text in the classroom too. And here's Lisa Yee.
Hi, I'm Lisa Yee. First of all, I want to introduce somebody else too. This is my Peep. Her name is Peepy. She goes with me everywhere. If you were to visit my website at lisayee.com, you'll see her with literally hundreds of famous authors and illustrators. But my Twitter handle is at LisaYee1 because there were other Lisa Yees. I'm an author of 10 books for children and young adults. My first book that I wrote 11 years ago was Millicent Main Girl Genius, and my latest book is Warp Speed. I write everything but picture books, but I would love to do a picture book someday so I can go like from cradle to college and cover it all. But it's really exciting to be here with all of you, and I look forward to this next hour.
All right, thank you, everybody. Lisa, I think it's funny that you said you wanted to do a picture book, and David joked about all of the chaos trying to get us all here that we should write a picture book. So maybe we can actually, do that soon. But before we get started, I just want to remind everybody that you can connect with us and your colleagues, your peers, your friends on Twitter tonight. You can do that by following #WritingThief. And you can follow the conversation. There's lots of resources. This is probably going to be fast-paced because we have a lot to cover in an hour. So if you follow it on Twitter, you won't miss anything. So I'm going to turn this over to Ruth now. She's going to run us through an exercise that you can find in her book, The Writing Thief.
Thanks, Jamie. So I didn't get a chance. I should have held up my sign too, because in case somebody wants to Twitter and get a hold of me, I would love that too. So one of the things about the writing thief that I find really interesting for teachers, it's pretty much geared toward grades 2 to 6, is that there are lots of examples of picture books, excerpts from chapter books. We don't get too much into young adult books because of the age span that it's kind of being targeted for, but finding also everyday texts that can teach students about writing too. So this is one that I have had in my files for years. This is a sign from the San Diego Zoo that's all about taking care of the plants at the zoo, and it's pretty much nothing but verbs. So I find these everyday texts and like to share them with students and see what they can do with them, and also learn a technique about writing. But the book I wanted to focus on first tonight here was one that's been causing a lot of stir out in the world, The Day the Crayons Quit by Drew DeWalt. I think a lot of teachers are really struggling right now with how to work with opinion writing and how to pull information out of text and be able to do that kind of real specific close reading. And so this is a delightfully funny book about all these different crayons and their point of view. So each crayon has a page, and this is the purple crayon, and the purple crayon is making the case for why it's being used and abused and the different things that probably should happen for it to make it so happy. And I like the blue one a lot because he's really dealing a lot with rivers and nature and what an important crayon he is, but he also talks about he's getting really short and stubby and he could really use a break. So in the book, I kind of describe this text as a possible text to use for information writing, for opinion writing, but then also, what some of the ideas might be to kind of get kids excited about writing their own opinions, picking another color, taking the point of view of one of these crayons and extending their information that they provide for their opinion and so on. So, the book itself just deals with lots of different mentor texts, narrative, informational, opinion texts, and then how you might bring those ideas into a classroom and help kids really connect the reading with the writing and have some fun doing it too. So it's kind of a passion of mine, and it's a good excuse for finding new books and good resources for myself and to bring them into schools all the time. So every one of these panelists here is the subject of, you can open almost any page of any of their books and say, I could use this section right here to teach kids something about writing. And I think that's a really powerful way to really engage kids and teach them important things. So I'm going to give this back to Varian and see what he has to say about that. Oh, I'm sorry. We're going to go to the discussion portion. Sorry, I jumped ahead.
That's okay. We're all excited. It's all right to get ahead of yourself. Like Ruth said, we'll jump right into a discussion. We asked teachers who follow IRA on social media for input on tonight's event. So we're going to discuss some of the things that you wanted to learn, but tonight let's start with basics. So Ruth, what makes a great mentor text?
Oh, this is kind of why I wanted to pass it on to Varian, I think. This is kind of a hard question. I think, for me, when I'm looking through books and materials, longer, shorter, whatever they are, newspaper articles, magazines, signs, posters, whatever, I'm looking for something that can really inspire a student and say, how could I do something like that? And being really specific with them. Did you notice in that San Diego Zoo sign the use of verbs? Could we put together a list of verbs like that that are active and really fun to communicate a message too? So we're only dealing with one thing at a time, and that's how I'm looking at text, is because a mentor text means you're going to probably use it to teach yourself something. So I learn from text all the time, and I know kids do too, and it kind of gets them unstuck from where they're writing to see how a professional writer handles something. So now I'm going to pass that on to Varian and see what you think about mentor texts.
Thanks, Ruth. I think you're right. Mentor text is just a way to get young people to write. And I deal with a lot of reluctant readers and reluctant writers as well. So often when I come in and I'm doing some type of workshop, we're trying to find a different way to get them to get to the page. And they're intimidated sometimes by the idea of writing a real story or something along those lines. But there's other ways and other approaches to it. So, I often look, I'm going to just pick up a couple of books here real quick. And one is Lisa Yee's Millicent Men, Girl Genius, and the other is Hard Love by Ellen Whitlinger. And both of these are great examples of books where there's text, but in Lisa Yee's book, there's a resume at the beginning of Millicent Men, which is awesome. So I've gone into schools before and had the kids to start with, well, what would your resume look like if you're in 6th grade? Or what will your business card look like? And that's a way to get them at least getting on the page, and then it goes from there. So really, it's anything for me that gets them to start writing, whether it's creative writing or something else, but it gets them active and engaged in it. Kate, do you have any thoughts on that? Oh.
Hold on, I had myself muted here because I'm never quiet enough. I never sit still enough when I'm supposed to be still. So there we go. I'm unmuted. Yeah, I mean, a lot of my books, I get notes from teachers saying, oh, I used this as a mentor text. Probably the most common of those is Over and Under the Snow, which is the story of a girl who goes cross-country skiing with her father and discovers this secret world of animals under the snow. And lots of teachers tell me that they use this as a mentor text for sensory language and descriptive details, which makes me very, very happy as a former teacher. But it's interesting, you think about what makes a great mentor text. I just went through my bookshelves earlier today, and I was pulling out books that I've used as mentor text or shared with students as mentor text. And so many books have great little excerpts. Novels, a couple of my favorite novels are The Center of Everything by Linda Urban and Bigger Than a Bread Box by Laurel Snyder. Listen, I'm just going to read you a couple quick excerpts from these. This is a tiny paragraph, the very first paragraph in Bigger Than a Bread Box. And the first sentence provides this really lovely opening for kids to do their own writing with detailed memories. So it says, I remember this one time, Mary Kate and I were at the playground, sitting in the swings, waiting for Mr. Softy to make his way down the hill to us. We could hear the tinkling music from his truck, and I had a sweaty $5 bill crumpled in my fist. My feet were dirty in their yellow flip-flops. It was summer. You can just pick the rich details out of there. Even deconstructing one paragraph like that for kids can help them see that the specific details are really what bring it to life. Here's another one of those. This is from The Center of Everything by Linda Urban, which has a parade as one of its main features. So I love this. The main character is describing this parade that's passing. 20 yards behind Captain Imus's whooping patrol car, 4 flag girls from the high school carry a wide banner with blue felt letters that spell out Bunning Day. Behind the banner is the rest of the flag squad, 6 girls in matching sleeveless sweaters and pleated skirts. In November, they will wear those sweaters over turtlenecks and wave their flags at football games and wish that they were warmer. But now, in the late June heat, the girls have lobster-red faces, and each is using her own favorite curse word to swear she will never try out for flag again. Next year, thinks their captain, Talia O'Hare, I am joining show choir instead. So just a small snippet of a novel like this can provide us with so many great details to share with students and so many great ways into that good, detailed, descriptive writing. And I just pulled a couple others off my shelf, picture books too. When we talk about Common Core standards, there's a whole lot of academic language in there, like compare and contrast, even at the younger years. And this is a book, My Father the Dog, by Elizabeth Blumley. It's a great Father's Day book, but it's also a really great mentor text for comparison writing, because it's a funny book about a kid who compares his father to the family dog. He says, my father pretends to be human, but I know he is really a dog. Consider the evidence. And then it goes on to talk about how, how they both scratch when they get up in the morning, things like that. Now, this is a funny way into that compare-contrast idea, but how much more fun is this than, comparing a zebra and a horse? So I think that's a great idea for a mentor text as well. And I'm going to pass it on to Lisa with, I'm sure, some more examples.
Hey, okay, so I know this is going to make me sound like a doofus, but when I was first invited to do this and we were going to talk about mentor texts, I thought, what's a mentor text? I'm supposed to talk about a mentor text, and I don't know what that means. And then I looked it up and I realized, oh, a book. We're going to talk about books, and we're going to talk about reading and writing and what books inspire us to do that. And so I was thinking back into, I speak in a lot of schools, and teachers tell me that of my books, what they love to do is, I have this one series. It began with Millicent Min, followed by Stanford Wong, and so totally Emily Evers. They use these books in point of view because it's the same summer, but each book is from a different kid's point of view. So the stories interweave, and so you can kind of get an idea of what goes on in each book like that. But I think that beyond just using books as the mentor text, I think that the number one thing, at least for me when I teach writing, is that I tell students the story has to draw the reader in. It has to be authentic. It has to be truthful. You have to tell a compelling story. And I remember one time I was speaking to a class, and I was reading from one of my books about the girls and boys and fighting. And this one boy stood up and he yelled, how do you know these things? And it's like, well, believe it or not, I used to be a kid. But that speaks to the authenticity of stories, whether it's dialogue or whether it's a family situation. It's got to come from the truth. It's got to come from the heart. And so it's one thing just to make something up, but it's another thing to actually research it, to listen to the way people talk, to listen to dialogue, and to use all that. And so I think that when we're looking at books to use as examples, it should be a book that draws us in from the first line, from the very beginning, and then keeps us going throughout.
Thank you. Lisa, I'm sorry, we didn't mean to scare you when we invited you to participate. But since we're here, I do just want to thank everybody who is watching and not watching the World Series. We really appreciate it. Also, this is Ira, and he would like to say hi to Pee-Pee. This is IRA's mascot. Hi. Okay, and then I guess we should get back into our questions. But again, don't forget to follow the hashtag on Twitter. I know there's a lot of conversation taking place right now. And maybe David Harrison is out there tweeting because he's not here with us. But hi, David. Let's get to the next question. Hold on. My screen froze. Hold on, please. One second. This is our first one, so there's going to be hiccups, so I apologize. Just bear with us as we work out the kinks. All right, there we go. What mentor text inspired you to become a writer, or is there a specific book or author that influenced your writing style? Ruth, do you have any input on that?
This was a question I read, several times and thought about quite a little bit, and I do have a favorite book that I read over and over again. But I wanted to comment too. I wanted to go back and comment too on something that Kate said when she held up her beautiful book, Over and Under the Snow. I was so interested to hear, that other teachers are using that for sensory details. I always look at that book as just an awesome mentor text for the use of transitions and sequencing words. So there you go. A book can be looked at so many different ways when it's so well written, and yeah, it's all very exciting work. So I don't really, I can't really tell you when I decided to write, because unlike my fellows colleagues here tonight, I don't write. I write professional books. Let's just put it that way. So it's more nonfiction writing, it's more academic writing, and I don't remember ever deciding to do that. But I do remember as a child being just absolutely caught up in stories, to the point that sometimes, the Wizard of Oz series was such a favorite of mine when I was a kid, and I, sometimes wanted to escape from my own life, so I would stand by the clock in the hallway, and at 1 o'clock on Sunday afternoon, I don't know if you guys know this, but that's the magic time where you can click your heels together and you can go to Oz, according to some of the later books. So I would try that every Sunday. It didn't work, but I always kept trying. So I know that literature influenced my life so much as a reader and then ultimately as a writer. So now that I'm doing this writing thing, which I love, I just had no idea how much I would love it. I have to tell you that every August I go back and I read this book, To Kill a Mockingbird. And I realize it may not be everybody's favorite book, but it really is mine. And it's been almost 20 years now that in August it comes around, and it's almost like a feeling in the air that I'm going to get to go back and revisit an old friend and keep learning from it. And this last year when I was reading it, I was noticing how it was put together and just the art of these little vignettes and how they all were so carefully seamed together. And it's just such a magnificent text for so many reasons at so many different levels that I think, you know, Harper Lee, I hope someday we'll find out that she has been writing secretly and not publishing in all the years since, because this book is so magnificent. It's influenced me so much. So I don't know, Kate, do you have, you know, special books in your life?
I do, and the truth is I got so excited about tonight, I brought so many books that I now can't reach them all, so I'm actually going to stand up and grab them because they're like way over here. It's like, wow, how to really mess up the Google Hangout. But yeah, I mean, I have my dog-eared copies of Ramona the Pest and Tales of a Fourth Grade Nothing. This is the cover of Ramona, by the way, not those new ones. But yeah, these were, I mean, Beverly Cleary and Judy Blume were really they were my teachers growing up. In addition to all my, you know, classroom teachers, I grew up in a really small town, and we didn't have authors in Medina, New York. You know, we didn't have people who wrote fiction for a living where I lived. And we didn't have an author visit our school when I was in school, and we didn't have the internet, for goodness sake. So we didn't have these Google Hangouts and the Skype visits that kids enjoy today. So really, I would you know, look at these and study them. And Ramona felt so real to me. I mean, she felt like she was going to show up in my classroom any day. And when I started writing for myself as a kid, I would look at these and be like, how did she do that? You know, how did she like spin this person out of thin air and make her seem so real? And so these remain mentor texts for me. But these days, I also read a lot in the genres that I'm writing. So if I'm writing a thriller like Eye of the Storm or Wake Up Missing, I might open up a thriller that I really admire for its pacing, The Hunger Games, for example. I read that book probably 5 times, plotting it out and looking at the pacing to try and figure out what was it about the pacing of that book that made it so unputdownable, and kind of studied that. With mysteries, I actually find that I have a mystery series with Scholastic that includes, let's see, so Capture the Flag. It's called the Silver Jaguar Society Mysteries, and Eye of the Storm, and Manhunt, which is over there. There it is. But this mystery series was great fun for me to write, but when I sat down to write the first one, you know, I started, and I, before that, was not much of an outliner, was not a very detailed outliner, and realized that that just wasn't going to work for a mystery. And so I started by studying mysteries. You know, I started by deconstructing mentor texts. So I actually, I have a mystery writing workshop that I do with kids, and I use the same sort of graphic organizer with them that I used when I was deconstructing mysteries to kind of get this sense for how they work and you know, what works well and what doesn't and what twists can happen along the way. So I will actually do a graphic organizer every time I'm working on a mystery. I start, and kids, when I do school visits, are always amazed. They're like, authors use those? Like, they thought this was some bizarre teacher invention that was like really only applicable to the classroom. But really, every book I write, I feel like requires different tools to write it. And so this is one that's a favorite of mine for mysteries. I put my heist in the middle of the screen, and then I brainstorm my suspects, and I, you know, consider all of their different motives, because, you know, suspects all have reasons that they might have committed the crime even if they didn't really do it. And then I brainstorm my investigators and their motives, because we don't always think about that, but most of us don't get up in the morning and say, you know, I think I'll go investigate a crime without having some reason that we would get involved in it. You know, and then there are places for clues and false clues. And you know, as I show kids, in the real world, it's messier than this. This is actually the graphic organizer I did for Hide and Seek, the sequel to Capture the Flag. And it's all over the place. You know, there are things scratched out, and I change my mind, and I think that's a coffee stain on there or something like that. But this works for me, and it's something that I learned from studying those other mentor texts. So I think it's kind of neat that we can use mentor texts not just in the classroom, but really as adult writers too. And I hope that the teachers and librarians who are watching tonight are thinking about this chat in that context as well, because teachers who write are better writing teachers. And I am going to toss it to, let me see, Lisa. I'm sure you have some things to add.
Okay, I'm here, but I'm trying to tweet at the same time we're live. So if you want to tweet to me or anyone here, it's #MentorText. If I bring down the interwebs, I'm sorry, because I tend to do that sometimes. So please follow us on Twitter also. Everything that Ruth and Kate said, that's what I have to say. I loved To Kill a Mockingbird. That is one of my all-time favorite books. Growing up, however, when I was young, there was a series of books by an author named Mary Calhoun about a girl named Katie John, who was this misunderstood tomboy. And I remember reading those books and thinking, she wrote that book for me. That author wrote that book especially for me, and I think that is so important. And then later, reading the All of a Kind family stories by Sidney Taylor, and I wanted to be Jewish so badly. I wanted to be Jewish. I wanted to live at in New York, the turn of the century, and eat this kind of weird fish and do all that kind of stuff. And I think that is what is so important with these mentor texts, that your reader associates, your reader feels that they are not just reading the story, but they're part of the story. And for me, the one book that really had an impact on me becoming a writer was Sharon Creech's Locked Two Moons. And I remember reading this, and I was an adult when I read this, but to me, books are just books. They're not necessarily a book for a kid or a book for adults. If it's a good book, it's a good book. And this is a great book. And I would read this, and I was so drawn into the story and the characters that I left this book along with To Kill a Mockingbird on my desk when I was writing my first novel, because if I would get stuck or something, I would just pick up the book and read a sentence. Or even now I keep this on my desk, because I don't know if this happens to any of you guys, but sometimes I'll be writing and I'll think, oh, I'm a professional writer, and then I'll forget, like, what do you do with commas? I mean, how do you write a sentence? And I'll just go blank, and I'll pick up an existing book, like, oh, that's where a comma goes. Oh, that's what a period is. I mean, because I think even we forget that kind of stuff. And it was funny when Kate was showing, how she works. I have all these little notebooks. I have this thing called memory loss, and so these are all used, and I keep them, and I put my notes in them when I'm reading a book, or if I'm just coming up with something, I'll write them down in this, and then if the ideas are any good, I'll transfer them to a Scrivener. That's a program that I use to write. I'll put the ideas there, and I hold on to these, and I write down the dates, like this says retired March 17th, 2011. I hold on to these because sometimes an idea that seems so bad, so far away, you might be able to use again later. So a combination of the books I love, triggering ideas that I have, put that together, and hopefully eventually it'll turn into a novel. Varian? Varian?
Here, just making sure I'm sorry, I was muted. Well, it's interesting listening to all of you guys. I think of mentor texts and how I got into writing similar, but I think about that for how I became a writer and then how I apply it to the books that I'm writing. So when I was growing up, I loved Judy Blume. I loved almost all first-person fiction. I realized, but I loved being in someone else's head and seeing the world from their eyes. And as I got older, I read books by Walter D. Myers and Virginia Hamilton. And specifically, I remember a book by Walter D. Myers called Motown and Dee Dee, and I read the book, and I got to the back flap, and I saw a picture of Walter there, very astute with his glasses, and that was the first time I realized that someone that looked like me could write books. I had never realized that before. I thought authors lived in some faraway place in some magical world called New York and did all these wonderful things, and I didn't know that someone like me who grew up in a very small town of South Carolina could become an author. So that's kind of what led me to not just being a lover of reading, but a lover of writing as well. As I started writing again, I went back to my love of first-person fiction, and going back to Ella Whitlinger's Heart of Love. This was a Prince Honor in 2000, and I read it and fell in love with it, and I knew that I wanted to write books for young people, and that's really what kind of jettisoned me along that path. Certainly the immediacy of it, the point of view, I loved everything about that. Specifically for The Great Green Heist was a bit of a departure from me. Not only is it a middle grade novel, and all of my other works were YA, but it's written from the third point of view with the pseudo-omniscient narrator there as well. And when I got the idea for the novel, I knew I wanted to write it, but I didn't know how. And a really, really good friend of mine, a debut author named Rachel Wilson, suggested I reread The Western Game. And I lent my copy to someone, but I'm going to show a picture on my phone with the old school cover. I read it back in the 80s when I was in elementary school, and I loved it. And then I came back and reread it again and again and again. And Ellen Raskin does such a great job with the novel because you got 16 characters all trying to win, Sam Westing's money. They just have to tell out who killed him. But you're in one character's head, and then she does this great way she hands it off to another character and then another character. So you're bouncing around, but you're not really jostled. And you also care about all the characters. You have one character that's really the main character, Turtle Wexler, who you kind of love, but she's got her own style. She's got this braid that she whips around and she kicks people in the shin. But she's got a good heart eventually. And I love that about her, but how you cared about her and how you cared about all the other characters as well, and just how she set that up. And I used a lot of that when I was writing The Great Green Heist as well, with the kind of baton pass. And I just reread that book, laid it all out, and saw how she structured it, and that really became the blueprint for me. So, excuse me, I'm losing my voice a little bit. I think I'm the last one. I'll kick it back to you, JB.
I forgot to unmute myself too. We are about halfway through our first Google Hangout, so thank you again, everybody, for hanging in there with us. No pun intended. Just reminding you again, just reiterating what has already been said, we are on Twitter. To get a hold of IRA, our handle is @IRA Today, and we are using the hashtag Writing Thief. So follow us and your friends on Twitter for some exciting conversation over there. And don't forget, you have to stick with us for the rest of this hangout, and to learn how you could win a virtual visit with one of the panelists. We just talked about a huge number of books, and I know my reading list has just grown by like 150, but why don't we talk about diversity? How can educators ensure that diversity is reflected in their choice of mentor texts? Ruth, do you want to start this one?
Sure.
Okay.
When I was growing up, I'm listening to everybody talking about, the influences in their lives about the books they read and the ones they hold so dear still. And I remember thinking, there is a world outside of my world, and I wasn't going to probably physically experience it, and if I was lucky, maybe when I was older, but as a young person, it was the way I was going to understand how the world worked. And so I don't think the word diversity was in everybody's vocabulary there as much, but I remember being pulled toward books that showed characters in different situations, different styles of life, different parts of the world, just different influences, and just being fascinated by, not everyone's life looked exactly like mine. So through the years, I think this has become such a hot topic for us as educators and writers and thinkers. And so I just went to my bookshelf really quickly, and just pulled out some books that right now I'm trying to work into something I'm working on. And so one of the first ones that grabbed me was One Crazy Summer by Rita Williams Garcia, which just, I read this book and it was one of those that you met and said, read this, I need someone to talk to about it, because it's just so compelling. It's layered, it's textured, it's funny, it's tragic, it's everything, but it's just really focuses on, you know, the lives of children in a big city with a situation that they handle so gracefully and beautifully. And so, you know, I thought, oh, well, that's one I want to mention. Then just a couple weeks ago, I found this book, which is, you know, Nino Wrestles the World. And it's just a hilarious book, but it's also brilliantly written with this wonderful Hispanic main character doing all these crazy, wonderful, exciting, adventurous things, and just a really different use of language, and very honoring and supportive of, you know, his culture and traditions. So I put that one on the must-share list. And this spring I had a wonderful opportunity to go to Abu Dhabi and work with teachers there who work mostly with Arabic. So all their students understand and write in Arabic, and they're learning English. And so this was one of the books that I took with them, The Conference of the Birds, which is a beautiful historical treatment of, you know, life and loss and being graceful and humble and those types of things told through folk tales that are culturally sensitive. So it's just a gorgeous book, and everyone there really liked it, didn't know about it, so that was fun. And then recently this book came across my desk. A very good friend of mine at Scholastic shared it with me, I Will Make Miracles by Susie Morgenstein. And I just, you know, there were just pages that just take your breath away. It's so simple. It's just about a very sweet, wonderful little kid who gets tired of everybody asking him, what are you going to be when you grow up, you know? And so he tells everybody that he doesn't want to do what everybody else does, but he wants to spend every morning waking the sun and stir the waves in the ocean. And, you know, he gets into wanting peace for the world and all these incredible, incredible goals that we hope our young people will have and move forward with and make the world stop fighting. And then toward the very end, he has this wonderful page where he's talked about hunger and disease and all these things that he's going to fix. But he says before he can do to that page, he says, to change the world from dark to bright, first I should learn to read and write. And so he pretty much ends his idea there of all the things that are possible to do in the world because he will learn to read and write. So finding books that are, you know, really warmly embrace cultural issues, different kinds of backgrounds, interesting situations. I haunt the lists on the internet that represent different interests. You know, I pull out books. I do the old Amazon trick, sorry, publishers, but I go to Amazon and look at a couple pages of the book, and then I look down below and it says, oh, people who like this book also like this book, and that's how I kind of get a collection of books that represent different populations. And it's been really fun kind of building things that way. So Lisa, you know, what do you do to kind of embrace this notion of diversity?
Well, first of all, this may come as a shock to everybody, but I am a Chinese American. You know, it's funny because when I was a kid growing up, there were, let me think. Oh, there were 0 books about contemporary books about, you know, Chinese Americans, and I didn't know that anything was missing because that was what was out there. That, you know, nothing. So I would go to other books and I would identify with the characters that I read. And then when I started writing, when I wrote my first book, Millicent Mingrel Genius, I wasn't writing with an agenda. I wasn't writing with a political agenda like, oh, I'm going to change, you know, I'm going to change the, you know, and talk about diversity. I just wrote about a girl who was like me, who was a third-generation Chinese American, and her story is not about a struggle of race or assimilation, but it's about loneliness, and her race happens to be part of the fabric of the story. And what I was shocked to learn after this book came out was this was the first book from a major publisher that had a contemporary Asian American kid on the cover. And this was just, you know, this was only about 10 years ago. So we've come such a long way from there. But in terms of mentor texts and books you can select, there's such a wide selection out there. But I think that when you're looking for a book to select, you know, for your readers, again, I think we need to go back to that authentic voice. Because what happens is, if you lead with race, if you say, okay, I'm picking this book because it's about race, it's about diversity, no, I think it should be about the story. It should be about the character, and it should be well written. And if it's well written, and a student or a child reads that book, an understanding of race or religion or who that person is will follow. So it needs to begin with character and not lead with diversity. Diversity is just part of the fabric of the story, and I think that's so important. Let's see, I'm passing to Varian. Do you have any comments on that?
Yes. You know, I partly just want to say ditto, ditto, ditto to what Ruth and Lisa said. I think if you look, there's so many diverse books out there, and diversity can mean different things. You know, we're talking about gender, we're talking about ethnicity, we're talking about folks who have some type of disability or maybe not a disability, or how we view all of these things through the way we see the world. Certainly there are a lot of great resources out there now. I know a lot of folks out there have heard about the We Need Diverse Books campaign that started up in the summer, and now it's kind of grown in this great organization that's really doing a lot of things to champion diversity in the books that we read, and they have some really great lists as well. I'm part of a group called the Brown Bookshelf, and we try every February to highlight African American authors that are writing just in general, whether they're writing about something that deals with race or not with race. We want to try to cover a spectrum and show that all writers can write about pretty much anything. But diversity is out there, and Lisa was very right that you don't always have to lead with race or with ethnicity. It's part of the story. It has to be part of that fabric, but it's not always the driving thing. Sometimes it is, and sometimes it's different. It isn't. Either way is okay, and kids should be exposed to both. Sometimes I think when we try to force it, kids want to recoil, and I hope that we can get past that. I can understand why kids do that sometimes. But diversity can just be displayed in so many different ways, from so many different points of view, and there are really some great resources out there that are covering and talking about it now. Kate, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think that when we talk about having diversity in mentor texts, ideally these mentor texts are the texts that are on your bookshelf in your classroom and libraries every day. They're the books that you're saying, oh, here's this one I love, and I can show you how this author did this. So to me, the key to having diversity in those mentor texts is having diversity on those shelves. And while I agree that it shouldn't be about the diversity, the selection of the book, it should be about the story, I also want to say this. You know, you saw the books that I held up, and oh, these were my mentor texts growing up. You know, those characters in Tales of a Fourth Grade Nothing and Ramona, they look like me. And as a teacher in my classroom, I taught a lot of students who didn't look just like me. So if you're teaching or running a library and you find that you look around and the books on your shelf have, you know, pretty much all faces that look just like yours, when not all your students do, you maybe need to ask some questions about, am I making sure I'm exposed to all these great books? Because there are just incredible books out there, like Varian mentioned. The We Need Diverse Books campaign has phenomenal lists. They also have a crowdfunding project going on right now, and if this is something that's important to you, as it is to me, you'll donate to that, and you can make sure that classrooms are provided with these books, and that authors who haven't been represented, whose voices haven't been heard, have a chance to do that. That's great. Just a few examples of some books that, like I said, came right off my bookshelf that I think are great as mentor texts. Me and Mama and Big John. This is a story about the building of a cathedral, and it's just a beautiful story about a family who goes to work as a stonecutter. It's not about race, but the characters happen to be people of color. It's a gorgeous book. The First Strawberries is a Cherokee story. It's retold by Joseph Bruchac, who's a phenomenal Native American author. This is a great mentor text because all of our cultures have stories. I mean, we have family stories that are shared, and those are traditional stories. In the same way, in some cases, that these traditional Native American stories and African American stories can be told. And we all have ownership of those stories from our own cultures. And so kids can retell those stories. And this is a great mentor text to introduce that concept of retelling a beloved story. One that I love and want to share, just for its simple, beautiful language, is Golden Domes and Silver Lanterns, a Muslim book of colors. Because when we talk about diversity, we're talking about not just diversity in, you know, what my skin looks like or what a character's skin looks like, but also diversity in where we come from and what we believe. And this is a gorgeous book, and you could use this as a mentor text. I mean, it wouldn't need to be a Muslim book of colors. You can share this and have kids examine their own traditions and, you know, what would a book of Hindu colors or a book of Buddhist colors or a book of Christian colors look like? What are those important symbols in my culture? And finally, when we talk about diversity, I think it's also important to think about diversity of voices. And I love this book. It's called Anything But Typical. It's been around a while. It's by Nora Raleigh Baskin. This is a middle grade novel, and the voice in this novel, it's one of the books that I always used as a mentor text when I'm working with students and teaching voice, because the main character narrating the story is neurotypical. He's on the autism spectrum, and the voice is very different from the voice in many of our heads. And if you haven't experienced that, it really is it's just a tremendous and beautiful window into that. And I think that's one of the biggest things we do when we provide our kids with diverse mentor texts is, you know, we talk about books as mirrors, a book that shows me myself, like Ramona did for me, but also as windows that show me what it might be like to walk in somebody else's shoes. So I think those books are really important for that. And I think I'm passing back to Jamie, right?
Yes. Thank you. David is still not with us, but he emailed me a couple of books that he considers diverse, so I'm just going to read those titles off. So he's not here, but I want him to feel included and have his input. So he suggests Voices from the March, which is by, I don't know who that's by, but Google it. Also, he recommended Harlem Hellfighters. Can I say that here? And Freedom Like Sunlight, Praise Songs for Black Americans. So those are David's recommendations for diverse books. Hope you like them. Thanks again to everybody who is joining us on YouTube. And I'd like to take a really quick second to thank Scholastic. They helped us prepare for tonight's event, and we couldn't have done it without them. So we really appreciate it. We have time for one more question. And then I will explain how one lucky audience member or Twitter follower can win a virtual visit with one of our panelists. Ruth, what mentor text or new book would you recommend for students, and what would they learn from it?
Well, that's an impossible question, so I'm just going to have to pass. It's like everything I touch and everything I've heard about tonight, I'm writing books down. I know my credit card tomorrow is going to max out. Thanks a lot, you guys. But here's one that I actually found the other day, Bully, by Laura Vaquero-Seeger. There is actually a wonderful interview by her online YouTube as she's talking about how she structured the text and what she was trying to get at and the message she was trying to convey. Very simple language here. We see this little bull being bullied by a bigger bull, and she talks about why she put that ahead of the title page, because she wants to set the context for this little bull who turns into a bigger bully, and that although it isn't an excuse, it's a reason, and that sometimes we have to get at that. And so this book goes through a whole series of, you know, more and more bullying going on until finally the different expressions change into those of reconciliation and eventually some friendship. So it's a really interesting book because we all know that bullies are a big factor in schools today, and it's really inhibiting to kids to be around them, and their whole sense of confidence as a learner and as a person is really, you know, all wrapped up sometimes in these negative interactions with others. So it's a nice book to get kids talking about that important issue, but also one to kind of show how a book is put together in such a thoughtful way. And then one other quickly that I want to share is Jacqueline Woodson's Brown Girl Dreaming, which I fell in love with. But I'm such a big fan of the free verse poetry novel. I don't even know. I'm sure there's a genre name for this that I'm not aware of. But I just, you know, it just reads so elegantly that it's just amazing. So I'm just going to read a real quick page. February 12th, 1963. I'm born on a Tuesday at University Hospital, Columbus, Ohio, USA, a country caught between black and white. I'm born not long from the time or far from the place where my great-grandparents worked the deep, rich land, unfree, dawn till dusk, unpaid, drank cool water from scooped-out gourds, looked up and followed the sky's mirrored constellation to freedom. I am born as the South explodes, too many people, too many years enslaved, then emancipated but not free. The people who look like me keep fighting and marching and getting killed, so that today, February 12th, 1963, and every day from this moment on, brown children like me can grow up free, can grow up learning and voting and walking and writing wherever we want. I am born in Ohio, but the stories of South Carolina already run like rivers through my veins. Now, how could you not want to go on and read a book that flows so elegantly and just articulately just gives you shivers? So that'd be one I'd highly recommend to everybody who's maybe not read it yet. And I'm going to pass on to Varian.
Well, okay, so now I feel like I should just pass it on because I'm going to talk about a Jackie Woodson book too. Jacqueline Woodson, Emotion. Another free verse novel. And what's really great about this, I use this very often, poetry, because as soon as they get caught up with the idea of what a poem's supposed to be or what it's supposed to look like. And Lonnie in the book struggles with poetry as well. The boy's name is Lonnie Motion. His parents died when he was 7 in the fire, and now at 11 he's kind of working through these feelings and kind of bouncing through the foster system. But it's poetry that tells a story and you feel real emotion. You hear his voice in the poems. And Lonnie even gets better throughout the novel as he works on the poems. He struggles with his line breaks and he gets better. Some poems are long and some poems are short. And some are funny and some are sad. And I find that young readers really resonate with it. We'll flip through and I'll read a poem and then I'll say, well, let's just try it out, put it out on the board, and we'll try it and we'll play with the line breaks. And really, it's them telling a story. We'll often say, well, let's tell a story, and then let's break it down, cut it up, and see where it falls. It's really fun. It's really engaging. It's a way to get them thinking about story in a way that, again, that's not always so just so tough for them to handle with the idea of this big set structure story. It's just a way for them to have fun. So with that, I'm kicking it over to Kate.
There we go. That mute button every time. I'm going to talk a little bit about informational writing because we haven't done a lot of that tonight, but that's another place where it's really important to have mentor texts for students that are not those awful textbooks, because that's most of kids' exposure to informational text is this, you know, whopper of a social studies book that's not necessarily written very well, and we have such great resources out there now. So one brand new book along those lines is part of the Scientists in the Field series. It's called Beetle Busters, if that isn't a great title. I don't know what is. This is by Laurie Griffin Burns, who also wrote some other books in that series, including The Hive Detectives, Chronicle of a Honeybee Catastrophe. But these are books that look at science, and I like to call this science storytelling. And it's a fascinating idea that part of our issues with our society right now, and I've read a couple books about this. There's actually a book out there called Don't Be Such a Scientist, that's about science's failure to communicate the things it needs to communicate to have a healthy, safe world, because scientists often talk like scientists instead of storytellers. And if we can teach our kids to talk like scientists, the way Laurie Griffin Burns talks like a scientist, a science storyteller, I feel like that's just an amazing skill. So these books follow scientists in the real world dealing with scientific problems, colony collapse disorder in the case of the honeybee book, and the invasive species Asian longhorn beetles that's threatening our hardwood forests in the case of beetle busters. But students can do this too. They can interview scientists in your community, and they can look, well, how did Laurie do that? I think these are just great mentor texts along those lines. And I'm also going to grab one of my books that's coming out this winter that is not nonfiction. The first clue is that it features a time-traveling search and rescue dog. Ranger in Time is a new chapter book series with Scholastic. But the interesting thing I think about this from the perspective of informational writing is that all the history in these books, the first book is set in the Oregon Trail, the second book is set in ancient Rome, is based on real solid history, trail diaries from the westward expansion movement, and tapestries and floor mosaics from houses in ancient Rome and in museums that are there now. So when you're reading historical fiction like this with kids, or even historical adventure stories, look at not only the text of the story, but also the author's note. Like if you take a look at the author's note for Ranger in Time, I'm basically pulling back the curtain on my research. And there are excerpts in here from the diaries that I found in Independence, Missouri, and things like that. So that can be a really useful mentor text too, when you can see not only the story, but a bit of the author's process. And a lot of authors share that on their blogs as well. Hey, after we're done talking tonight, I am going to go back on Twitter, and I'm going to keep the hashtag Writing Thief, and I am going to tweet links to every single book I talked about tonight, and I'm going to link to IndieBound, so we're supporting independent bookstores. And I would encourage everybody else who was talking tonight, the books you mentioned, if we could all do that. I'd love it if we could all support indie bookstores. If we could all do that, I think that would be absolutely great and a great resource for the people who were listening tonight too. And I am passing to Lisa. I almost forgot. Lisa.
I thought you were going to also say, and I'm going to have a party after we're all done.
Everybody come over. It's been fun.
There are so many great books out there right now, but one that really rose to the top of my pile that I read recently was The Lightning Dreamer, Cuba's Greatest Abolitionist by Margarita Engel. And this book is so fabulous. Like books that Ruth and Varian mentioned, this is in free verse. So I guess we're like on a free verse kick right now, but it's wonderful. This book is about a young girl named Tula, and for her, growing up, in the 19th century in Cuba, books and knowledge were her salvation, because in that era, girls were expected to marry very young and not protest and just do what they're told. And so the language of this book is just beautiful, and so is the imagery. And, through her life, she's awakened to the plight of the females and the injustice of slavery, and the imagery is just so gorgeous and heartfelt. And when I was reading it, my heart broke and my heart sang at the same time with the book. And let me just read you a little bit from the beginning, and you can see what I'm talking about. It begins, "Books are door-shaped portals, carrying me across oceans and centuries, helping me feel less alone." So this is just a gorgeous book, and I'd recommend it to anybody, any age, any race. It's a wonderful story, and it's going to make your heart sing.
Thank you. Kate, I really like your idea of sending the links out to the books. I'm more than happy to do that as well. Probably not tonight, but tomorrow I can get that done for everybody. But I think people are more interested in learning how to win the virtual visit with one of you. So all you have to do, it's really easy, is tweet, "I'm a hashtag writing thief, and I want to hang out with blank and at IRA today." Just fill in the Twitter handle of the author that you want to have a visit with. And if you're not on Twitter, it's really easy to join. Just as soon as this ends, just hop on that website and sign up. Once again, all you have to do is tweet, I'm a hashtag writing thief, and I want to hang out with blank and at IRA today. Can everybody see that? You can enter from 9 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time tonight, right now, until 9 o'clock p.m. on Saturday, November 1st. The winner will be selected randomly, and we will announce it the week of November 3rd. We'll announce it next week. And in case you haven't gotten it yet, there's everybody's handle. And David Harrison, if you would like to visit with him, is at David L. Harrison 1. Don't forget the 1 on the end of David L. Harrison. We made that mistake today, and sorry, other David L. Harrison, if you're watching. But anyway, so there's everybody's handles. You want to hold them up again one more time?
Mine's backwards.
Oh, Varian had David's. Cool. Okay, well,
Mine backwards.
we are technically out of time, but is there anything that anybody would like to share with our audience, like pointers, strategies, tips, anything? Did we leave anything out, Ruth?
Buy the book. Good ideas for becoming a writing thief, and I just can't thank my colleagues enough for participating tonight. Hope everybody had a good time. I sure did.
It was a lot of fun. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks so much, guys. It's been great.
Yeah.
Thank you, IRA, and thank you, Scholastic.
Yes, thank you both.
Well, thank you, everybody who joined us tonight online, and definitely our panelists. I know our audience is going to get a lot to take away and bring with them into the classroom tomorrow and every other day. If you would like to order Ruth's book, it can be, the link is reading.org/writingthief. It's also, I believe, on Amazon, and it's right here. And like Ruth said, it's great. Go out and get it. Lots of great contributors. Once again, thank you to Scholastic for helping us organize this, and I think we are done our first Google Hangout. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Have a great night.
Good night.
Good night. Thanks, everybody.